Are you really a Jeep owner? We are covering controversial topics here in the Jeep community, and last video at 43 minutes long did absolutely fantastic, and you guys said we want more, so here we are today. You know, a lot of these videos, when we think of the idea, when we start conceptualizing what do we want to talk about, how do we lay it down, how do we not sound rude, mean, condescending, whatever you want, we look at what you guys are saying in the comments, what you guys want to see, and maybe some of the most controversial things. It seems like this is a big one. And the way we talk about this is, are you really a Jeep owner? I think this question transcends a lot of different time, a lot of different generations, and a lot of different age groups that own Jeeps. So you might own a Jeep, but someone might not think you're a true Jeep person. Maybe you're a mall crawler. Maybe you don't wheel enough, bro. Maybe you go to Starbucks too often. Maybe you want to just hurl insults at someone because they don't use the Jeep exactly the same way that you do. And today's video, we're going to try and keep it a little bit unbiased, but we might go a little bit biased and talk about, you know, are you a Jeep owner? And what makes a Jeep owner? And how can we unite maybe the two different subsets of Jeep ownership? I think this is going to be interesting because we're going to try and break down what an old Jeep owner looks like. And I'm not talking old in years. I'm talking like old school Jeep owner, what the Jeep started as. And then what a new Jeep owner might embody, because they're very, very different. Without further ado, let's get into it. A Jeep Dive, episode number 2. So let's talk about this. I'm going to hit it up with the what a Jeep started as. Well, to be honest with you, it didn't even start with the words Jeep. You know, when the Jeep was produced, it was stood for the GPW, which is a 3-letter abbreviation, and it stood for Government Contract, 80-inch Wheelbase, and the Willys, or Willis. Well, we've already covered that argument in a separate topic, and that's what the GPW was labeled. So it was produced by Willis, or the original blueprint was by Willis, 80-inch Wheelbase, and a Government Contract. If you guys say the word GPW quick, GPW, 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 Jeep. It kind of makes its way to it. So they were produced from 1940 to 1945, and they were used for World War II. They were purpose-built, and they were produced to be a light-duty service vehicle in the Second World War. Pretty amazing stuff. And they were designed for that exact reason. They were designed to fight. They were designed to be small, to be nimble, to be compact, to be easily serviceable. And then after the war was over, they still wanted them. So the folks that were getting out of the service, the veterans, the folks that served, and folks at home, they kind of saw this niche for a vehicle that could do a lot of different things, be nimble, be compact, be rugged, be a workhorse, and thus the CJ2A was born. So built by Willys. I'm not going to say this 20 times. Willys or Willis. I'm going to say Willys throughout the rest of the video. You guys can yell at me in the comments. The CJ2A was produced from 1945 to 1949, and it was the workhorse of America. I've got an ad pulled up here. This is probably one of the coolest ones I've seen. I'd love to almost like print this out and put it on the wall. Across America, around the world, the Jeep does more jobs for more people. And if I zoom in here, it's like, use it as a truck, use it as a tractor, use it as a mobile power unit, use it as a runabout in Argentina, use it to reach a remote beach in Florida, use it in Australia because the engine can operate a PTO drive and help farm, use it to run a paint sprayer in Ohio. This is such a cool ad, but what it does for me is embodies that the purpose of the Jeep back then was to be seen as a multifaceted farm use vehicle. In fact, another creative ad said the all-around farm workhorse. So this was targeting Americans back then that were looking to buy something that wasn't just a vehicle, but would work harder for them, that could be beat up, left out wet, and still run the next day. So it was definitely intended for that purpose. Now after that, you had the CJ3A, you had the CJ3B, CJ5, CJ7, CJ6, CJ8. You had all sorts of them working up through it. And I would say for the vast majority of that progression, most of those Jeeps were designed and intended for their workhorse ability. It changed ownership a few times during that. And as it got further on, much like American culture, it had to adapt. The same beliefs in the 70s when the CJ7 was out were nowhere near what the CJ2A was back in the 40s. I know some of you guys here on this channel probably were in both of those generations, both of those periods, and just drop a comment below if the 70s were a bit different than the 40s. I'm sure you guys can fill in the blanks down below. As we got further and further, the Jeep transcended from being a workhorse, from being just intended to be a multi-purpose kind of utility vehicle, to something of its own subculture. It was born from war and turned into something that could be used all over the place, but then it turned into more consumeristic, or more consumerism was involved from marketing groups. The CJ5 was kind of the first little dabble of that. Of course, there were different trims and packages you could get over the years, but the CJ5 had Renegade packages, they had Levi's packages, and they had all sorts of different trim options, engine options that made them more of, this isn't a workhorse anymore. This is an off-road machine, and this is also looks pretty good on the street for when I take it down through. The CJ7 had your Golden Eagle. It was featured in TV shows all over the world, and that once again started to kind of transform away from that workhorse into more of a multifaceted vehicle that is targeting a different audience. So when I say the original Jeep owner, I'm talking about someone that refers to owning a Jeep needs to be using it exactly as it was intended when they first were released. They were released just like this advertisement here, to be used as a workhorse and to be run through the mud and really just prove their paces. Now, as we go into modern day Jeeping, a lot has changed. So in the beginning of this video, I wanted to clarify what we say is kind of the, you're using it for a purpose, you need to use it for what it was for, versus I'm buying a Jeep because I like it, and how those two can merge together to maybe create a solution for the future where some of these communities can start to overlap and maybe even learn some things from each other.
The Jeep to me growing up was just to ride in the back, have the top and doors off, and cruise, and that was in the 90s. So you had the YJs into the TJ era, and even then that was a little bit past the kind of workhorse era of the Jeep. And even then, the Jeep was starting to transition into more of a consumable vehicle that wasn't necessarily used for the farming and the agricultural stuff. It was kind of intended to take off-road, or at least kind of build a different kind of culture and lifestyle by taking the doors off, cruising to the beach. That was all very present in both of our childhoods. You were a little bit more in the off-road kind of scene back in those days, and you can probably attest that it was very kind of off-road driven back then. A lot of people would take their Jeeps off. They intended to use it off-road and take it out and adventure with it, use it for the lifestyle, enjoy it. So it kind of went from that agricultural purpose use to more of the off-road base in the 80s and the 90s, and it kind of transitions to even more as we move to the modern years. But I just the root of it is that it's an ever-changing culture in the Jeep community, and I think I do miss aspects of the old style of Jeeps, but I do think that there's some value in the newer way of looking at buying a Jeep.
Well, yeah, no, Ryan, I think you bring up a lot of good points there. It's almost as if Jeep kind of followed along with the culture at the same time. I mean, I know you say a lot of vehicles did as well too. Like you look at trucks, you look at pickups, super long beds, and then they start going to crew cabs, and then the beds get shorter as time goes on because people start using them differently. I know the truck community is probably the same way as the Jeep. You don't use that thing like a real truck. I think it's the same thing, Ryan. Like I used to have an 8-foot bed, and now I have a 5-foot bed, but I have a crew cab that has heated and cooled leather seats. A lot different, and it changed with the culture. But I think there was a pretty significant change in the late 70s to early 80s, going from the workhorse then to the off-road / lifestyle. I often reference that the Jeep brand as a whole, they reference it like buying a set of cross-country skis. The person that buys a set of cross-country skis is using them to go cross-country skiing, and the person that is buying a Jeep is using it as a Jeep. So there was almost a purpose-built vehicle that a lot of people were used to going out, getting stuck, going out in the mud and having fun with their friends. Where it changes, where at least it changes for me, is the YJ. So the YJ was 1987, it was released, and that was a huge jump from the CJ7 to the YJ. They went away from the circular headlights, which pissed a lot of people off, and went to the 5x7 rectangular headlights, which was in like everything during the 80s. Everything was hip to be square. But the YJ had a lot of features that the CJ7 didn't. It had power steering standard. It had a lot of more interior creature comforts. You could actually option AC. It had Sahara models. It had different trims that you could pick up and really make it more of a comfortable on-road vehicle while having a lower center of gravity and being a little bit wider too. So this one was definitely based for the consumer because of all the litigation that happened with the CJ7. I read an article from 1981 that actually said Jeep paid out over $9 million for some of the rollover lawsuits back in 1973 up through the 80s. So a lot of money Jeep was spending, and they wanted to kind of separate themselves from that image, from the image of the rollovers, from that real rugged, and they would make something that was more streetable. So when I say the new Jeep owner, I'm not skipping over the YJ and the TJ because I still think there was a ton of off-road community. There was a ton of wheeling that still happened with those, but I definitely think that they were more directed towards the consumer, towards the daily driver, than they were that original purpose. I grew up in the backseat of a CJ7 Golden Eagle, had a YJ as my first vehicle, had TJs, everything else. So I kind of understand these vehicles and the simplicity of them. And Ryan's dead on the nails. In the late 80s through the 90s, through even the early 2000s, I think Jeep embodied more of a lifestyle, and the transition was from workhorse, off-road prowess, lifestyle, to now what it is today, which we're gonna get into right now. What is the new Jeep owner? What does a new Jeep owner look like compared to that old school one? The old school obviously wants to use a Jeep like it was intended for in the beginning. I think the new Jeep owner might have been founded in about the year 2007. And I'll say that for a few different reasons. 2007, the year of the JK, the year of the JK four-door. I know when that came out, I was appalled instantly. I was, what is Jeep doing? They're making an off-road minivan. They've added two doors to the back. What the heck is going on? Nobody's going to want that. If I could have looked back, seeing where it is now, I've owned only four-door JLs, and I actually own two-door JKs, but the four-door was the beginning of making this an even more family-friendly and an even more multi-purpose vehicle. That was the start of it. You added two extra doors, and the rest is history, as they say. I would venture to say about 90% of current Wrangler sales are four doors. So Jeep did their homework on that, and it worked out very well for them. But as that shift changed to a four-door, I think that's where we saw a lot of that kind of divide really happening. I can recall when it came out, everyone saying, two doors, I'm not going to four, I'll never do it, that's a minivan, that's a mall crawler, that's this and that, that's meant for your family, blah, blah, blah. Two doors the way to go. And I think that was kind of the start of that two path, Ryan. I think you had a lot of guys that had the TJs, the YJs, CJ7s, even older, and they stayed that hardcore wheeling, that hardcore lifestyle. But folks that maybe had a TJ, but grew a family, went that four-door route and said, you know what, this isn't bad. I can fit my whole family in the back, throw some gear in there too, and drive this daily, and I don't need to get a Jeep as a secondary vehicle. Because mind you, the old school Jeep guys, a lot of those vehicles were secondary vehicles. They weren't daily driven. They were more meant like keep it in the garage, drive it on the weekends, and just have fun with it and use it for its purpose. But when you go to work, you had a secondary vehicle. This wasn't your daily driver. So the new Jeep owner started in 07, and I think it really picked up about 2012, and then coming to the late end of the JK into the early JL. It's a lot more of, I bought a Jeep because it fits multiple check marks versus I bought a Jeep just to use it to off-road. So I think that's where we started having to increase that checkbox on there. And as we increase the checkboxes on there, we keep adding features, heated seats, remote start, one-touch roofs. We kept adding things on so that way Jeep could continue to encompass a larger fishnet before they circle down into buyers. And that's what I would argue is the new Jeep owner. So what I'm talking about in this video, really the difference is buying a Jeep to use it as a Jeep versus buying it because you like it, how those two can cross, what the old generation can learn from the new generation, and vice versa.
I can attest that even when the JL came out, you didn't like the body lines of it. Right. You just didn't care for the look of it. And maybe that's just any, old school Jeep person. Yeah, just there were some things that you just didn't care for, and I can agree, and I can believe that you didn't care for a four-door back in the day when all you knew was two-door, right? But logically, as a company that's trying to expand, and broaden the base, especially with Jeep being a little bit behind other auto kind of manufacturers, they were seeing the trend, seeing the market go into more family, more SUV, more lifestyle, more of that kind of audience, that they needed to adapt to it. And I think the four-door is what they need to do. You said it, it's like majority of sales nowadays in the Jeeps. So it definitely started that. I would also say that like towards 2012, that kind of area, you and I both worked in a company that sold Jeep parts. It became a huge part of the consumer base to like add parts to your Jeeps. And we talked about this earlier off camera, but the parts that you add to some of the older Jeeps were more purpose related, I would say. More bumpers, lift kits, wheels and tires. I mean, all the stuff that we put on the newer Jeeps now, but they were built in a way to last and be durable off-road and to do that kind of lifestyle. But where now you're just seeing more parts and more stuff added to increase the lifestyle aspect and the customability of your Jeep to make it more you and more. So we're going to get into that a little bit as far as the newer Jeep owners and what they're kind of using it for the most. But yeah, it was a big shift back in the JK for the 4-door. But I'm curious to see your thoughts on bridging the gap between the two, because I think that's like the biggest thing we need to figure out right now is bridging the two groups together, because you looked up the definition of
Consumption subculture.
a consumption subculture. Tell me about that a little bit, Matt.
Let's talk about it. Because we got a comment from one of our viewers that actually said about this. A consumption subculture is a group of people who share a commitment to a specific product, brand, or activity and have a unique set of values, beliefs, and behaviors. Kind of sums up a Jeep owner as a whole. I know we can't put one definition on it, but Jeep people are crazy. We love these vehicles more than most things in life, and I think the same goes for like Harley Davidson owners, for AC/DC fans, for people in that culture that just love something so much as a brand or a belief that it becomes your whole lifestyle. I mean, we base some of our vacations around Jeep shows. It doesn't get any cooler than that, but there's definitely a lifestyle to this, and I think the lifestyle changed pretty much going in that old school versus the new school, and then how can we bridge the gap? So that's going to be the hardest thing to do, and this is kind of some of our personal takes on this, but I think that there definitely is a pretty big gap in between the two. The guys that go out, they wheel all the time, they're not necessarily into the flashy mods, it's all kind of strictly purpose and function built, versus the new owners or that style that just wants to jazz it up. They want to get some really cool maybe style mods on there. They want to add on the decals, lighting, RGB, LED whips, things of that nature to really make it their own. Maybe they wrap it with a Star Wars theme or add their name to it. There's kind of a difference between those two. And I think the biggest clash is now coming at Jeep shows, because as you walk down aisles, you see giant vendors having Jeeps on 42s, coilovers, and supercharged engines. And then next to it, you've got a Jeep that actually has tweeters built into the control arms down below. So it's a subculture that has definitely shifted. You've got those guys that are hardcore wheeling, they're out there all the time, and then you've got the guys that maybe don't want to see a trail and they just want to use it to daily drive it, but they're still buying it because it's a Jeep. Bridging the gap between those two is probably easier said than done, because it's almost two cultures that are clashing inside the Jeep community. And I think there's two unique cultures. The guys way back when I started off-roading, Ryan, I'll airdrop all the photos I have from my JK and Cherokee days of being stuck 3 foot up to the door in mud. It was a different lifestyle for me. I had 95 YJs, 97 TJ, 98 TJ, all these Jeeps. You didn't really care as much about them when it came to how pretty they were, how good they looked. I can remember my buddies and I purposely running our Stinger bumpers into each other's spares when we were sitting at parking lots. Maybe we'd hook up and pull their Jeep out a little bit. Maybe we'd get stuck 3 foot deep in a mud hole and there's water coming in through the Cherokee side doors. That was more the lifestyle with that. Those Jeeps were built so I could work on them. They were built a little bit easier, and I could beat them up and know that they were structurally a little bit more sound than what they are now. Versus you have a different culture today that's more into the style, more into the personal appearances of it, and kind of some new fads that have come out, right? Like the ducking fad. That seems to be the biggest cause of pretension lately is, I walk out and I see a duck on my Jeep, and the first time that it happened to me, I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. I don't duck. I don't have a bag in the back. My son does. He loves to run up to the Jeeps and throw them on there, and he's 2.5 years old. And I see it not as, man, this is what the Jeep community has really come to. I remember when these things back in the day used to be X, Y, and Z. I see it as someone that's just trying to connect with you and making an innocent gesture. I really see it more than just the Jeep community. I see it as someone saw my Jeep and likes it, And what I want to tell you guys is a little story sitting in a coffee shop when I'm drinking a coffee and I watch 2 young kids get out of the back of a 4-door that was lifted and done up and throw 2 ducks on my Jeep. And they were probably 8 and 10 years old, and they were smiling from ear to ear. So by kind of eliminating that, and I've seen people like throwing ducks, chucking them, cutting them up. It's just a gesture from someone that says like, hey, nice Jeep, I like your ride. And I'll almost go out on a limb and say those same people that are ducking other Jeeps, that are putting something on there, even if you've got an old classic Willys or you've got a CJ7 or CJ5, they're probably not mocking your Jeep. They really do like it. So I think the stone goes both ways. For you to throw away and kind of take that nice gesture out versus being like, hey, somebody liked my Jeep, is pretty rough in our opinion. And I think transcending the gap a little bit is just kind of understanding where both people are coming from. I said earlier, the check boxes get longer and longer for what someone needs to purchase. I'll give you a little stat here. 1987, a Jeep Wrangler MSRP'd for around $10,000. I've got an ad, Jeep YJ original ads, it said King of the Hill, $89.95. So $9,000. In today's adjusted economy, you're talking about $28,000 to $30,000. 1997, the TJ came out, $13,995. Today's economy, about $30,000 to $32,000. 2007, $18,900 for a two-door JK, about $31,000 right now. And 2024, the MSRP for a two-door is $32,000. So we're very similar to what it was. Now, I know those inflation rates may be way out of whack, but I did look it up here. I just wanted to throw together those numbers. But that's a base starting Jeep, and I think for a lot of people, because the lifestyle has changed so much and the checklist has gone down so far, you're not able to pick up a two-door base. If you're gonna buy a Jeep, you wanna make sure that that thing is comfortable to run, to go do errands, to go take your kids to soccer practice, to maybe be able to off-road with it, but to check off a lot more boxes to spend that kind of money. And we're seeing a different demographic. Really, guys, I don't want to get off tangent, but I do believe, Ryan believes, that there is a Jeep and a community out there for everyone. The biggest thing that I've ever said on this channel, and it rings true, is that if you're driving a Jeep and you're happy, then I'm happy. I do not throw that judgment into there. If you don't want to use it, if you don't want to take it off-road, but you just like that lifestyle, you like what you bought into, and you like the people that you're surrounded with, that's awesome. If you want to chop it up, throw it up on 42s, coilovers, and stickies, and go out and wheel blacks and reds, that's awesome too. But I think what we need to realize is that we're both buying the same vehicle, and that we're both part of the same crowd. So while we might not do the exact same things, maybe there is a way that the hardcore guys can start to give some of the newer guys some tips and tricks on to how to go out, not bust up their Jeep, and start to realize that you had to start somewhere too. I mean, I started in a two-door 95 YJ, and I had to take it out and learn how it could perform on leaf springs, not coils and shocks and control arms. But back in the day, I had to use a portable air compressor that had enough power to pull out the leaf spring bolts and then buy all new ones from Fastenal. I remember the story beautifully. My dad was there, my buddies were there. It was in my grandparents' shop, and that's where I learned to be a Jeep person. But I learned all that, and over the years, the only thing I could think of is trying to give advice to the first-time Jeep guy, to somebody that's just getting started. I'm not gonna be, well, I was doing this back when you were yay high, you know, I know exactly how to do it. You guys don't know what you're talking about. I'd rather give that guidance and give that advice and be able to show you guys and give you some credibility. It's in our name, Dirt Road Cred. We get a lot of comments lately. Some are pretty rough. I just read one off camera here to Ryan that we just got a few months ago. And, you know, a lot of folks really rip on the channel for some certain things. They rip on us. Why aren't you guys off-roading all the time? Why aren't you taking it out every week? And it's because we use our Jeeps for a lot of things. Not only are they part of this shop here, the business, the Dirt Road Cred, the DRC media, but they're my daily driver. My 392 takes my kids to school. They take me up to different places. They take us off-roading to the dunes in Ocala. It's more of a lifestyle vehicle that can do that and does do that. But Dirt Road Cred isn't hardcore wheeling cred. But really, guys, the name Dirt Road Cred is almost like a euphemism like street cred. You know, you've been around the block, you've seen a thing or two, and you want to try and present that, and that's what we're doing. And it's earning your cred based upon how you see it, right? Everyone earns it in different ways. Maybe that was 50 years ago when you're on the farm running one of these CJ2As. Maybe it was for Ryan rolling around in the back of a 98, 97 TJ, something like that. As a kid, for me, it was working on a CJ7 Golden Eagle. It doesn't matter where you came from or how you ended up in the Jeep community. We're glad to have you here. And that's what I think the Jeep community as a whole needs to get back to, is it doesn't matter what got you here and how you're here now or whether you left and came back, because there's so many stories. If I had one when I was a teenager and 50 years later, these guys were calling me and ordering a new Jeep, We are glad to have you here. Let's get you back into the community and show you a little bit of everything. But as a community, I think we need to do a better job at defining what a Jeep owner is. And I think we need to loosen up some of the definitions and standards and such those hard lines on what being a Jeep owner is. Invite some people around and maybe you'll be surprised at what you guys talk about together. We go to shows all over the country. We talk to customers and people all over the world. And what unites us is the exact same beliefs. And just like that subculture, the consumption subculture, we all have the same beliefs and values. And I think that's what really it comes down to. Kind of another segment we wanted to add onto this, we said it about it in the intro, is what is our standpoint on this? Or how can we really give you some statistics, some analytics, what we see on the back end? And, you know, having run YouTube channels like Ryan and I have for going on 7 years, you know, not this channel, but going on other ones, we've got a lot of information, a lot of knowledge about that. And it really rings true as far as what kind of content we present to you guys. So doing this for almost 2 years, we've got a lot of data. We get about 500,000 to 600,000 views, something like that a month, Ryan. Sometimes it's even 1 million views a month. And we know a lot more about our demographics. Now, YouTube won't give us everything, but we can see where folks are watching, what age group are they in, what gender are they, you know, male or female, and what they're watching, and what gets clicked upon the most, what's the highest watch hours. You know, our biggest demographic is from the ages of 45 to 70. So the demographic of 45 to 70-year-olds is the most viewed, or viewership is the highest on our channel. You know, while those young guns, the 18 to 24-year-olds, and then 24 to like 35 or 40, it's starting to pick up steam. I can remember when Ryan and I were back in that stage. When I was 17 and 18, I was cobbling together cash to try and buy a set of lights for my Jeep. We didn't have that kind of money. And what I'm saying with all of this, so we release a lot of different style of content, some installs, some lifestyle, some top 10 Amazon mods, releasing all the content that we do. It seems the vast majority of our viewers enjoy the mods. They enjoy the modifications. They enjoy showing new products, whether it's Clayton or Motobuilt or Azudo, Distinction Applied. They enjoy seeing the quality products coming out, how we install them, some tips and tricks, the lifestyle videos of us going down to Locked and Loaded and building Jeeps. I'll be real with you. I enjoy the build process of a Jeep. I love that process. I love starting from scratch. It's like building a house for me and going through that and sharing it with you. And the hard thing is when you go out and wheel and try and film it, it takes about 90% of the enjoyment away. It's not easy to do, guys. So when you go out and wheel, last time we did it, we took 2 or 3 extra guys. We had a few cameras set up. We filmed for about 8 hours straight, and we got one 13-minute video, maybe a 20-minute video out of it. And the entire day, it's more or less trying to not destroy Ryan's Jeep while spotting him, try and talk on camera, go up the trail with the amount of knowledge that we have and try and present that on camera while also not trying to make errors because we know the comment section will rip us apart. The comment section for the one said, I could never follow you guys behind the Rubicon Trail. You go too slow. That trail I could hit with a minivan. And just a lot of comments of that nature, right? You know, comments that don't really show the true difficulty of the trail or the rest of the day that we went through. So it's funny because some person once asked me, they said, you know, if Jeeps are your business, what happened to your hobby? And that really rang true because when I go out and wheel, when Ryan and I go out and wheel, when you film, it takes a lot of the fun out of it. It takes it more into a work day versus a fun day. And I think a lot of you guys that are watching this that have done that before, you can definitely attest to what we're talking about. So
yeah, so I am addicted to looking at the analytics of everything that we produce, and we take a lot of pride in that. You know, I think we like to sit down. We like to produce we want to produce entertaining stuff first and foremost on the brand that we love. And as much as we love going out and doing that stuff, and we're going to continue doing that stuff here and there, we'd like to try some different trails all around the country for sure. It's not going to be our main content, and there are great YouTubers out there that can do that stuff, and they do that awesome. And we recommend a bunch of them that go out and wheel the living crack. KC250, Liam Upfit goes out a bunch and shows off their rigs, but they do it great. And we are looking forward to meeting up and doing some stuff with them in the future for sure. But, you know, the heart of it comes down to, you know, what we put on our Jeeps and building it from what you said. For me, it's the lifestyle of taking the top and doors off and cruising down the road. I also like to tear up the cornfields when it snows out. You know, like the ability to use the Jeep for what it is, that's the coolest part for me, that I can do that stuff when I want to, as well as make it my daily driver. put 20,000 miles on my Jeep in a year. Like, I drive the living heck out of my Jeep. So to say that we're not Jeepers because we're not out on the trail every other day shooting content it's not true, you know, because we are in these things every day. We love them. We like to take them out and use them, but we can also show you how to use them. I mean, that's not what we don't do. Matt has been he's guiding me through the trail as we're trying to get these videos shot, and I'm trying not to break my Jeep. He's not trying to break my Jeep. And we're trying to film. Yeah, and we're trying to make a quality video too. So there are great YouTubers out there that do that stuff, and you know, we kind of want to perfect that a little bit to a point, but when you see the amount of time and then the resources it takes to kind of produce some of the content, it's hard to justify sometimes, and that's just being transparent as a company that makes YouTube content. But it doesn't mean we're going to stray away from that stuff. We do want to see how we can perfect it and make it better for the future, maybe a little bit more efficient, because I think there are ways that we can do that as well. And we'd love your feedback too. And if you haven't seen any of our wheeling content, we do have a couple videos out there. Go check them out, because they could use some love as well, because it was a lot of work and a lot of effort that was put into them. But we do take a lot of pride in our work, and you know, we just like talking about Jeeps and being in them, because that's who we are. It's our whole life.
Yeah, Ryan, that was well said. I hope this video turned into positive. I think there's a lot more positivity in this video, and honestly, we just like to flesh things out and show them to you guys on the channel. So Ryan, I'm sure, is going to do a fantastic job of editing this content and throwing some cool stuff up. But what we want to hear from you guys down below is, where do you think the shift was from like that more utilitarian Jeep to more of a lifestyle brand, and why? Also, like, where did it change for you? You know, when did you stop using a Jeep like just for a farm vehicle to a daily driver, and why'd you go back and forth, or what did you have done to your Jeep? So we're kind of curious about that in the comments. Last video got over, it's almost like to 1,000 comments. It's a ton of people commenting, and we love that. So drop that down below. Also, if you like this style of content, we've heard some really good results from you guys. So we're really excited to keep doing this. And if you have some future video ideas you'd like us to cover, drop that as well. We love reading that from you guys, and we get a ton of ideas. If you guys made it this far in the video, all the way to the end, comment DRC 2024, and the first person timestamped, the first person that commented that will get a free shirt. So you'll pick a size small through 2X. We've got the first person to write DRC 2024 gets a free shirt. And if you aren't the first person, just write it down below, because we love seeing that. So
it tells us that you've been watching.
Yeah, it lets us know. We can look at that username and say, that's the real guy right there. Guy or gal, yeah. So until next time, though, we're going to shut this laptop down. Ryan and I are going to go enjoy our Jeeps and cruise around in the 80-degree October weather here in PA. But from Ryan behind the camera and me in front of this iPad, we want you to get out there and earn yours.